Growing up in a tranquil little town was a unique and deeply enriching experience, one that left an indelible mark on my heart and soul. It was a place where familiarity was woven into the very fabric of daily life, where the sun's warm embrace seemed to linger indefinitely, casting a golden glow over everything it touched. The town itself was a haven of peace and simplicity, where the pace of life was gentle and unhurried, and where each day unfolded with a comforting predictability. It was a place where neighbors knew each other by name, where smiles were exchanged freely, and where the sense of community was as strong as the roots of the ancient trees that lined the streets. The rhythm of life was a soothing melody, one that lulled us into a sense of security and belonging. The streets were lined with charming houses, each with its own story, and the air was always filled with the scent of blooming flowers and fresh grass. Our family home, a modest yet welcoming abode, rested at the periphery of a sprawling forest. This forest, with its towering trees and whispering leaves, was a comforting presence that stood like a guardian of our peace, offering a sense of security and connection to nature. Its vast expanse was both mysterious and inviting, a place where adventures awaited and where the imagination could roam free. The forest was a world unto itself, a sanctuary of tranquility where time seemed to stand still. Within this serene setting, my family, comprised of my loving parents, my spirited younger sister, and our steadfast dog, Max, found solace and contentment. We were a close-knit unit, our lives interwoven with bonds of love and laughter, each day a testament to the joy of togetherness. Our home was filled with warmth and joy, a sanctuary where we could retreat from the world and find comfort in each other's company. The walls of our home echoed with the sounds of laughter and the gentle hum of everyday life. Yet, as with every seemingly serene existence, there lay beneath the surface a hidden current, an undercurrent of the unknown, and something ominous lay in wait, ready to disrupt the harmony we had taken for granted. Our story unfolded on a crisp autumn evening, a time when the air was filled with the earthy scent of fallen leaves and the promise of change. The sun's retreat painted the heavens in a breathtaking tapestry of orange and purple hues, a scene so vivid and beautiful it seemed almost otherworldly. It was a moment of tranquility, a fleeting glimpse of perfection that seemed to capture the very essence of our lives. Gathered around the dinner table, we basked in the glow of familial warmth, sharing stories and dreams, our laughter echoing within the walls of our cozy home. It was a ritual we cherished, a time to connect and reflect on the day's events, to share our hopes and dreams, and to find comfort in each other's presence. The aroma of our favorite meal filled the air, mingling with the laughter and love that seemed to radiate from every corner of the room. We would sit for hours, immersed in conversation, oblivious to the passage of time. But the tranquility was short-lived, as Max's sharp, unexpected barking pierced through the air, shattering the moment and pulling us back to reality. Positioned at the back door, his fur stood on end, a sentinel alerting us to a threat unseen. His barks were not mere noise, they carried an urgency and a warning that sent an involuntary shiver coursing through me. We tried to dismiss it as a reaction to woodland creatures or a distant vehicle, a rational explanation that seemed reasonable at the time. But deep down, we sensed that Max's alert was only the beginning of a harrowing ordeal that awaited us, an ordeal that would test our strength and unity. As nights evolved into an endless sequence of darkness and foreboding, Max's barking grew increasingly frenzied, a desperate plea trying to convey a warning we were yet to comprehend. He seemed to perceive a presence in the shadows, something invisible yet undeniably real, something that evoked a primal fear in him. Each evening, my father, our pillar of stability and strength, would venture into the night, flashlight in hand, scanning the shadows for a glimpse of what unsettled our loyal companion. Yet, despite his thorough searches and our growing unease, nothing appeared amiss. The nights were silent, the darkness impenetrable, and the source of Max's distress remained elusive. Still, the certainty in Max's growls was unsettling, and an oppressive sense of unease began to take root among us, an ever-present fog that clouded both our minds and our home, casting a shadow over our once peaceful lives. The nights felt longer, the darkness more profound, as if the very essence of our safe haven was being eroded by an unseen force. With each passing night, the atmosphere within our household started to morph, growing heavier and more charged with tension. It felt as if the air itself was pregnant with an impending storm that loomed unseen, a storm that threatened to upend our lives. I found myself lying awake, ears attuned to the nocturnal symphony of the forest, every rustle and crack amplified in the weighty silence. Max's nocturnal alerts became our nightly vigil, a relentless reminder that left us all on edge, assessing shadows with fresh wariness and a growing sense of dread. The once comforting sounds of the forest now seemed ominous, each creak and rustle a potential harbinger of doom. The night was no longer a time of rest, but a period of heightened alertness, where every sound was a potential threat. Then, on a moonless night, reality lurched beyond anything we could have foreseen. The outside world lay cloaked in unnerving blackness, a darkness so complete it seemed to swallow all light and hope. Max's frantic, desperate barking reached an unbearable crescendo, only to be silenced abruptly, as if an unseen force had snatched away his voice. The ensuing silence was so severe that it echoed louder than any cry, a void that seemed to pulse with malevolent intent. Realizing that danger had breached the boundaries of our safety, my father, his face a mask of determination and fear, armed himself with a bat and motioned for caution, urging us back into safety. Despite his warnings, fear and an irresistible pull of curiosity captured my spirit, leading me to shadow him into the oppressive night, my heart hammering in my chest with a rhythm that matched the enormity of our dread. The night air was thick with tension, each step a testament to our growing apprehension. Crossing the threshold onto the porch, reality crystallized as I perceived it. A forbidding silhouette emerged from the darkness, an entity larger and more menacing than any creature familiar to me. Its eyes bore an unsettling glow, exuding malevolence with a mesmerizing, sinister allure. It moved gracefully, its every step amplifying a terror that seemed to defy both logic and nature. My father, fearless against the encroaching fear, shouted at the beast, the bat an ineffective talisman against its ferocity. The creature, unfazed by any show of human resistance, propelled itself forward with unimaginable speed, and as chaos ensued, reality seemed to fracture. The world around us dissolved into chaos, a whirlwind of fear and confusion that consumed everything in its path. The subsequent moments blurred, a cacophony of terror mingling with the visceral sounds of conflict, the echo of screams, the guttural snarls of combat, and the sickening thud of impact as flesh met bone. My mother and sister, driven by love and desperation, rushed to aid, yet the creature's relentless fury seemed insurmountable. And in that seemingly hopeless juncture, it was Max who proved to be our savior. Hurling himself with pioneering bravery at the monstrous threat, Max afforded us the crucial, fleeting seconds to retreat indoors, hastily enacting a barricade against the impending menace. Yet, the cost of our salvation was unspeakably dear. The creature's fury was unlike anything we had ever encountered, a force of nature that seemed unstoppable and all-consuming. When dawn's light finally vanquished the night and solitude returned, the creature vanished into the recesses of the forest, taking with it our beloved Max, now a haunting absence and an everlasting void in our midst. His loss was a scar woven into our family's fabric, a painful reminder of bravery cut short. My father, once our patriarch of unwavering strength, was visibly shattered, and an overwhelming cauldron of guilt and helplessness consumed me in a manner I was unprepared to face. The weight of Max's absence was a constant presence, a reminder of the sacrifice he had made for our safety. As days transitioned to nights in our altered reality, I swore an oath to myself that unpreparedness and inaction would never define me again. Immersing myself in rigorous training, I sought knowledge and skills in self-defense and survival, determined to transform my grief into a weaponized force. Crafting a sleek, lethal blade, I christened it Max, a tribute to our noble protector. Each swing of the blade was a tribute to his memory, a promise that his sacrifice would not be in vain. With each precise swing of the blade, every drop of sweat that testified to my dedication, my resolve crystallized further into an indomitable will. Duty-bound, I vowed to shield my family from future threats, ever vigilant to the lurking perils in the shadows. The memory of that fateful night, stained with Max's sacrifice, remained etched in my consciousness, a solemn reminder of the heavy cost of complacency. The blade became an extension of my will, a symbol of my commitment to protect those I loved. Standing sentinel, watchful and unwavering, I ready myself for the unknown battles yet to unfold. The echoes of past terrors haunt my thoughts, yet simultaneously, they propel me onward, fueling an unyielding determination to defy fear and eclipse its power over my life. Max's essence endures within me, resonating through the weapon I wield, a steadfast symbol of my pledge to protect those I cherish, facing shadows with courage and conviction, and honoring the heroism of a lost but never forgotten guardian. As I stand on the precipice of the future, I am reminded of the lessons learned and the strength gained from the trials we endured. The shadows of the past may linger, but they no longer hold sway over my spirit. I am ready to face whatever challenges lie ahead, armed with the knowledge that love and bravery can overcome even the darkest of nights. The journey ahead is uncertain, but I am prepared, fortified by the memory of Max and the unwavering bond of family that no shadow can ever diminish. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. As far back as my memory stretches, my cousin Jake was more than just a relative. He was like an integral piece of my very existence, always there, always a part of my world. We weren't merely cousins. We were like brothers, intricately woven together by a tapestry of shared experiences and mischievous escapades in our quaint, sleepy town. It was the kind of town where everyone knew everyone else's business, and every story, no matter how implausible, spread like wildfire, becoming part of our collective consciousness. Growing up side by side, our bond was not only unshakable but also unparalleled, a connection that was as natural as breathing. Yet, it was Jake's insatiable thirst for adventure, his relentless pursuit of the extraordinary, that often guided us into the most remarkable and, at times, bizarre predicaments. Among Jake's myriad of interests, nothing captured his keen, adventurous spirit quite like the legends and myths that seemed to hover at the edges of our reality, especially those so spine-chilling that they'd make even the bravest among us shudder with fear from their terrifying whispers. Jake was completely enthralled by these stories, drawn to them with an intensity akin to a moth's fatal attraction to a flame. The tale that held the most fascination for him was that of Tall Tim, an enigmatic specter rumored to wander the decaying relics of places long forsaken by light and laughter. This looming figure supposedly haunted the shadowy, forgotten recesses of the old paper mill, his silhouette an indelible mark against the fading canvas of bygone industry and prosperity, a ghostly reminder of what once was. Jake's obsession with Tall Tim reached new heights as the summer drew near, setting the stage for what would become an unforgettable and chilling chapter of our childhoods. His desire to prove himself in front of his friends, to show them that it wasn't just talk, that he truly wasn't all bark and no bite, pushed him to hatch a plan that would draw us both into the heart of the terrifying legend. Naturally, being his closest confidant and partner in crime, I was swept along into this daring, albeit foolhardy, expedition. It was as if the very essence of adventure called to us, beckoning us to uncover the truth behind the myth. The day of our adventure arrived as any other unassuming Saturday, bright and cheery, belying the ominous undertones of our upcoming exploit. Armed with flashlights, a modest collection of snacks, and possibly faces more courageous than our pounding hearts, we plunged into the dense overgrowth that threatened to conceal the path leading to the paper mill. It was as if nature itself was conspiring to guard the secrets buried within those dilapidated walls. Each step we took announced our presence with a brittle crackling of leaves and an eerie snapping of twigs beneath our feet. The woods seemed to play a mournful symphony, marking every footfall with a whisper of what lay ahead, a foreboding melody that hinted at the mysteries we were about to unravel. Eventually, the paper mill materialized before us, a colossal and ghostly monument to a time long forgotten, standing as a sentinel of the past. Its towering smokestacks spiraled into the sky like the twisted digits of an ancient phantom striving to capture heaven itself. The entrance yawned wide, a cavernous mouth ready to engulf us in its darkness, beckoning us to step into its shadowy embrace. Despite every instinct in my gut urging me to turn back, Jake's determination was a beacon that refused to waver, pulling us ever forwards into the unknown. Once inside, the stale air clung to us like a shroud, thick with dust and the metallic scent of lingering decay, a testament to the years of neglect. Silence blanketed the vast interior, pressing in from all sides, the kind of disquiet that set your mind racing with imagined whispers lurking just beyond the visible. We moved with deliberate caution, our flashlights cutting wide arcs, casting shadows that mocked our bold intrusion with their wraith-like dance across the crumbling walls. It wasn't long until our investigative endeavor unearthed the morbid secrets concealed within the echoes of this forsaken place, secrets that would forever alter our perception of reality. Scattered about at odd intervals were the remnants of erstwhile lives, a forgotten wrench here, a ragged piece of attire there, and, beyond denial, the unmistakable specter of bones. Human bones. My stomach twisted into nauseating knots as realization clawed its way into my consciousness, assembling the macabre puzzle before us into a nightmarish scene. Jake, however, appeared curiously unfazed, his initial bravado diminishing ever so slightly as he examined the grim discoveries with an unsettling calmness, as if he were trying to piece together a puzzle that had eluded him for far too long. Then, out of the darkness came a movement that arrested our attention, my heartbeat vaulting to a frenzied pace. We froze, our flashlights snapping to the point of disturbance. There stood a figure, excessively elongated, cloaked in shadows that seemed to form a symbiotic fog around it. Was this the infamous Tall Tim brought to life, a myth materialized, or something more sinister yet? The sight of this apparition sent shivers down my spine, a visceral reaction that left me paralyzed with fear. An overwhelming tide of panic surged through my veins, and instinctively, Jake and I spun around and sprinted. The world warped into a blurred rush of chaotic images as we retraced our path, the spectral echo of footsteps mirroring our flight through the hollow, oppressive corridors. Every silent prayer, every desperate plea to whatever power might be listening, bubbled to the surface of my mind, a beacon of hope for our survival, a plea for deliverance from the nightmare we had unwittingly stepped into. Yet the whim of fate interceded with its own cruel designs. As we neared the longed-for exit, one moment Jake matched my stride, then in a terrible instant, he vanished, swallowed by the void behind me. His haunting scream fractured the air, reverberating through my very core as I staggered to an abrupt halt. Desperation seized me. I called out his name over and over, my voice crumbling into the oppressive silence that answered back, a silence that seemed to mock my futile attempts to reclaim him from the darkness. Frozen at the precipice, I battled within myself, torn between the primal urge to flee and an overpowering drive to reclaim my cousin from whatever malevolence held him. But fear's icy grip proved unyielding. I fled, tearing away from the spectral figure and encompassing shadows, albeit with the desperate hope that Jake was still close behind, that somehow he would emerge from the shadows and join me in the light. When I recounted our dreadful experience to the townspeople, their reactions greeted my tale with skepticism, bemused smiles often accompanied by patronizing glances. They chose to see an overzealous imagination rather than the stark truth. Jake's disappearance became another ghost story, a mystery seamlessly woven into the rich tapestry of our town's storied sanity. But I knew too well the reality of what lurked in the sinister corners of that forsaken mill, a reality that haunted my every waking moment. Even now, as I pen these recollections, the chill remains, as relentless as my enduring guilt. The whispers persist, a haunting reminder of what Jake and I stumbled upon, and the lurking malevolence that still roams the deserted echoes of days past. Tall Tim may be a name passed down through local lore, but something cold and restless lingers among those ruins, and it remembers. The memory of that day, of the terror and the loss, remains etched in my mind, a constant reminder of the darkness that lies just beyond the reach of light. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. I never imagined that a simple visit to comfort a friend could spiral into a nightmare that would forever haunt my existence. It all began when my close friend, Melanie, reached out to me with the heartbreaking news of her grandmother's passing. I had met her grandmother only a few times, but her presence was unforgettable. An aura of mystery and wisdom surrounded her, much like the old house she lived in. When Melanie asked me to accompany her to the funeral, I didn't hesitate to say yes. Little did I know, this decision would lead me to an ancient ritual known as the Sin Eater. The day of the funeral was overcast, the sky heavy with clouds that mirrored the somber mood. Melanie's family home was nestled in a secluded area, surrounded by dense woods that seemed to whisper secrets of their own. As we arrived, I noticed the house was filled with relatives and friends, all gathered to pay their respects. Yet, there was an underlying tension in the air, as if everyone was anticipating something beyond the usual mourning. After the service, Melanie's uncle, a stern man with a gaze that seemed to pierce through the soul, approached me. He spoke of an ancient tradition passed down through generations, a ritual meant to cleanse the soul of the departed by transferring their sins to a willing participant. This participant, the Sin Eater, would consume bread and wine placed upon the chest of the deceased, symbolically taking on their sins. To my surprise, Melanie had suggested me for this role. I was taken aback, confused about why I was chosen for such a task. Despite my reservations, Melanie's pleading eyes and the insistence of her family swayed me. They assured me it was merely symbolic, a gesture of goodwill to honor her grandmother's memory. Reluctantly, I agreed, hoping to bring some solace to my grieving friend. As the ritual began, I felt a chill creep down my spine. The room was dimly lit, candles flickering as shadows danced along the walls. I stood before the open casket, a piece of bread and a goblet of wine placed carefully on the chest of Melanie's grandmother. With trembling hands, I performed the ritual, feeling the weight of unseen eyes upon me. The bread was dry, the wine bitter, and as I consumed them, a strange sensation washed over me, a heaviness, as if a dark cloud had settled within my very being. In the days following the ritual, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. I began experiencing vivid nightmares, shadowy figures lurking at the edges of my vision. The air around me felt dense, oppressive, as if I was constantly being watched by an unseen presence. Despite my attempts to rationalize these experiences, the sense of dread only grew stronger. Melanie's family, once so present, seemed to vanish overnight. Their phones disconnected, their house abandoned, as if they had never existed. Panic set in as I realized I was alone, left to grapple with the consequences of the ritual. I tried reaching out to Melanie, but she too had disappeared without a trace. The haunting presence followed me everywhere. I could feel it in the chill of the wind, see it in the flicker of shadows that seemed to mock my every move. Sleep became elusive, my nights filled with whispers that echoed in the darkness, accusing me of sins I couldn't comprehend. The burden of the ritual had become an inescapable part of me, a curse I couldn't shake off. Desperate for answers, I delved into research, uncovering the dark history of the Sin Eater ritual. It was said to bind the participant to the sins of the deceased, a sacrificial act that could never be undone. The more I learned, the more I realized the gravity of what I had done. I was trapped in a cycle of guilt and fear, haunted by the shadows of a past that wasn't mine. In my search for redemption, I sought out spiritual guidance, hoping to find a way to cleanse myself of the burden I carried. But every attempt only deepened the shadows, as if the very act of seeking salvation was an affront to the forces that bound me. I was a prisoner of my own making, ensnared in a web of darkness that threatened to consume me. As time went on, I came to understand that the ritual had forever altered my existence. The shadows were not just a haunting presence, they were a part of me, a constant reminder of the sins I had willingly taken on. I had become the Sin Eater, bound to the darkness until the end of my days. In the quiet moments, when the world was still, I could hear the whispers of those who had come before me, their voices a chorus of sorrow and regret. I had joined their ranks, a silent guardian of sins unspoken, forever burdened by the shadows I had chosen to embrace. And so, I remain, a solitary figure haunted by the past, forever intertwined with the darkness that dwells within. The burden of shadows is mine to bear, a testament to the choices we make and the consequences that follow. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, the oppressive weight of my decision never lifted. Each morning, as the first rays of dawn filtered through my window, I awoke with a sense of dread, knowing that the shadows awaited me. They lingered in every corner, a constant reminder of the ritual that had bound me to this fate. I found myself avoiding mirrors, unable to face the reflection of a person I no longer recognized. My eyes, once full of life, now seemed hollow, as if the darkness had seeped into my very soul. Friends and acquaintances noticed the change in me, their concerned questions met with vague answers. How could I explain the inexplicable burden I carried? How could I make them understand the invisible chains that held me captive? In my quest for understanding, I visited libraries and archives, poring over ancient texts and forgotten manuscripts. I hoped to find a glimmer of hope, a way to reverse the curse that had ensnared me. Yet, every page I turned only deepened my despair, revealing the ritual's origins and the inescapable fate of those who became Sin Eaters. It was a role that transcended time, a dark legacy passed down through generations. The more I learned, the more isolated I became. I withdrew from the world, retreating into the shadows that had become my constant companions. My home, once a place of comfort, now felt like a prison, its walls closing in on me as the whispers grew louder. They spoke of sins I couldn't remember, of transgressions that weren't mine, yet they clung to me like a second skin. Sleep offered no respite, as my dreams were plagued by visions of those who had come before me. Their faces, twisted in anguish, haunted my nights, their voices a mournful chorus that echoed in my mind. I awoke each morning drenched in sweat, the weight of their sorrow pressing down on me like a suffocating shroud. In moments of clarity, I considered reaching out for help, but fear held me back. How could I explain the supernatural burden I bore without sounding insane? The world outside seemed oblivious to the darkness that consumed me, its inhabitants blissfully unaware of the shadows lurking just beyond their perception. As the years passed, I resigned myself to my fate. I became a silent observer, watching life unfold around me while I remained trapped in my own personal purgatory. The shadows were my constant companions, their presence a reminder of the choices I had made and the consequences I would forever bear. I often wondered about Melanie and her family, their sudden disappearance a mystery that gnawed at the edges of my sanity. Had they known the true nature of the ritual? Had they willingly sacrificed me to the darkness, knowing the burden I would carry? These questions remained unanswered, lost to the void of silence that surrounded me. In the rare moments of peace, I found solace in the knowledge that I was not alone. The whispers of the past, once a source of torment, became a comfort, a connection to those who had walked this path before me. Together, we formed an unspoken bond, a fraternity of souls bound by the weight of sins unspoken. And so, I continue to exist, a solitary figure shrouded in shadows, forever haunted by the past. The burden of shadows is mine to bear, a testament to the choices we make and the consequences that follow. In the end, I have come to accept my role as the Sin Eater, a guardian of darkness, forever intertwined with the sins of those who have gone before. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. I remember the day the storm began as if it were etched into my mind with icy claws. The morning had started innocuously enough, with a gentle snowfall blanketing our small town in a pristine white coat. I had always found a certain peace in the silence of snow, but that day, the quiet felt ominous, as if the world were holding its breath. By noon, the wind had picked up, howling through the streets like a banshee's wail. I was at the local diner, sipping on a cup of coffee and watching the flakes dance erratically outside the window. The news on the radio warned of an incoming blizzard, urging everyone to stay indoors. But in our town, nestled in the mountains and used to harsh winters, such warnings were often met with a shrug. As the afternoon wore on, the storm grew fiercer. I decided it was time to head home. The streets were nearly deserted, the usual hustle and bustle replaced by eerie stillness. The snow was falling so thick and fast that it was hard to see more than a few feet ahead. I could feel the cold seeping through my layers, biting at my skin. When I finally reached my house, I was relieved to be out of the wind's relentless grip. I checked my phone, no service. The power flickered ominously before going out entirely, plunging me into darkness. I fumbled for the flashlight I kept in the kitchen drawer, the beam cutting through the shadows like a lifeline. The hours dragged on, the storm outside a constant roar. I tried to distract myself with a book, but my mind kept wandering back to the storm. It felt alive, as if it had a mind of its own, and its intentions were anything but benign. By nightfall, the blizzard had become a full-fledged monster. I could hear the trees groaning under the weight of the snow, branches snapping like bones. The house creaked and shuddered, as if it too were trying to withstand the storm's fury. I peered out the window, but all I could see was a wall of white. The world outside had vanished, swallowed by the storm. I felt a pang of isolation, a creeping fear that I was cut off from everything and everyone. Sleep was elusive that night. I lay in bed, listening to the storm's symphony, my mind conjuring up images of what might be happening outside. I thought of my neighbors, wondering if they were safe. I thought of the old man who lived alone at the edge of town, his frail body no match for such cold. I thought of the children who might be scared, huddled under blankets, seeking warmth and comfort. The next morning, the storm showed no signs of abating. The snowdrifts were higher than I had ever seen, barricading me inside. I tried the door, but it wouldn't budge. Panic began to set in. I was trapped. Days passed in a blur of white and fear. The storm was relentless, a beast that refused to be tamed. I rationed my supplies, each meal a reminder of my dwindling resources. The cold was a constant companion, seeping into my bones, making it hard to think, to move, to hope. I tried to keep track of the days, marking them on a calendar, but time seemed to stretch and warp in the storm's grip. I felt myself slipping into a haze, the line between reality and nightmare blurring. On what I guessed was the fifth day, I heard a sound that sent a jolt of adrenaline through my body, a voice. It was faint, almost drowned out by the wind, but unmistakable. I rushed to the window, my heart pounding. Was it a rescue team? A neighbor? Or was it something else, something the storm had brought with it? I called out, my voice hoarse from disuse, but there was no response. The voice had vanished, leaving me alone with my thoughts and fears. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was out there, lurking in the snow, watching, waiting. The storm continued its relentless assault, a force of nature that cared nothing for human life. I thought of the stories I'd heard as a child, of spirits that roamed the mountains, taking vengeance on those who dared to defy them. I had always dismissed them as myths, but now, trapped and desperate, they seemed all too real. As the days turned into a week, my hope began to wane. I was weak, the cold sapping my strength, the isolation gnawing at my sanity. I couldn't remember the last time I had felt warmth or heard another human voice. On what I feared might be my last day, I heard the voice again. It was closer this time, clearer. I stumbled to the window, my breath fogging the glass. Through the swirling snow, I saw a figure, indistinct and shadowy. It beckoned to me, a silent invitation. I knew I should be afraid, but something inside me stirred, a flicker of defiance. I couldn't stay here, waiting for the storm to claim me. I had to act, to take a chance, to believe that there was still hope. With trembling hands, I forced the door open, the snow cascading in around me. The cold was a shock, but it was invigorating, a reminder that I was still alive. I stepped out into the blizzard, the wind tearing at my clothes, the snow blinding me. I followed the figure, its shape shifting and elusive, always just out of reach. I stumbled and fell, the snow swallowing me, but I pushed on, driven by a determination I hadn't known I possessed. Hours passed, or maybe just minutes. Time had no meaning in the storm. I was exhausted, my body screaming for rest, but I kept moving, the figure my only guide. Finally, I saw it, a light, faint and flickering, but unmistakable. It was a beacon, a promise of safety, of warmth. I stumbled towards it, my heart soaring with hope. As I drew closer, I realized the light was coming from a cabin, its windows glowing invitingly. I reached the door, my hands numb and clumsy, and knocked with all the strength I could muster. The door opened, and I was enveloped in warmth and light. A man stood there, his face kind and withered. He pulled me inside, his voice a balm to my frayed nerves. "You're safe now," he said, his words a lifeline. "The storm can't hurt you here." I collapsed into a chair, the relief overwhelming. I was safe. I had survived the storm's wrath. As I sat there, wrapped in a blanket and sipping hot tea, I thought of the figure that had guided me. I asked the man if he had seen anyone else out there, but he shook his head. "Just you," he said. "You're lucky to be alive." I nodded, though I couldn't shake the feeling that I owed my life to something, or someone, beyond my understanding. The storm had taken so much, but it had also given me a second chance. As I drifted into a deep, dreamless sleep, I knew I would never forget the storm, or the whispers in the blizzard that had led me home. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. The sun was beginning its descent, casting a warm, golden hue over the vast Texas landscape as I navigated my weathered pickup truck down the long, dusty road leading to Whispering Pines. This small town, nestled in the heart of Texas, had always intrigued me. Its name was misleading, as there were no pines to be found, just endless expanses of flatlands dotted with the occasional tumbleweed. I had heard countless tales about this place, whispers of its unsettling past that piqued my curiosity and compelled me to visit. The stories spoke of a town with a haunted history, where shadows of the past lingered in every corner, and I felt an irresistible pull to uncover its mysteries, to understand the truth behind the legends that surrounded it. The journey to Whispering Pines was not just a drive through the Texas plains, it was a voyage into the unknown, a quest to unravel the enigmatic threads of its history. As I pulled into the town, an eerie silence greeted me. The streets were almost deserted, with only a few locals casting wary glances my way as I drove by. The town seemed to wear a shroud of decay, with buildings that appeared to have been abandoned by time itself. Paint peeled from the walls, and windows were clouded with dust, giving the impression of a place forgotten by the world. The silence was profound, broken only by the occasional rustle of a tumbleweed skittering across the road. My destination was the only bar in town, a place aptly named The Last Prayer. It struck me as an odd name for a bar, but then again, this was a town steeped in oddities. The name seemed to echo the desperation that clung to the town's history, a final plea for salvation in a place where hope had long since faded. It was as if the town itself was a relic of a bygone era, a place trapped in a time loop, unable to move forward or forget its past. I pushed open the creaky door, and a dimly lit room greeted me, filled with the unmistakable smell of stale beer. The patrons, a handful of rough-looking men, turned their heads to scrutinize me with suspicion in their eyes. Their gazes were sharp, as if assessing whether I was a threat or just another curious soul passing through. The atmosphere was thick with tension, a palpable unease that settled over the room like a heavy fog. Undeterred by their scrutiny, I made my way to the bar and settled onto one of the worn-out stools. The seat creaked under my weight, a testament to the countless travelers who had sat there before me, seeking refuge or perhaps answers in a town that offered neither easily. It was a place where stories were exchanged in hushed tones, where secrets were guarded fiercely, and where the past was never far from the present. The bartender, a grizzled old man whose name tag identified him as Joe, approached me with a nod of acknowledgement. His face was lined with age, each wrinkle telling a story of its own. His eyes, however, held a certain wariness, as if he had seen too much and trusted too little. "What'll it be?" he asked, his voice raspy from what must have been years of smoking. There was a guarded quality to his demeanor, a reluctance to engage with the unknown. His presence was a constant in the bar, a fixture that seemed as old as the town itself, as if he were the keeper of its secrets. "Whiskey," I replied, striving to maintain an air of nonchalance. As Joe poured me a glass, I decided to engage him in conversation. "Quiet town you got here," I remarked, hoping to draw him out. There was a tension in the air, an unspoken understanding that outsiders were not entirely welcome. The town's insular nature was evident in every wary glance, every whispered conversation that ceased as I passed. It was a place that had learned to protect itself, to shield its heart from the curious and the uninvited. Joe let out a dry chuckle. "Ain't much to do around these parts. Folks here keep to themselves," he said, his tone carrying a hint of resignation. His words were tinged with a sense of isolation, a reflection of a community that had learned to rely solely on itself. It was a place that had turned inward, guarding its secrets jealously against the prying eyes of outsiders. The town was a fortress, its walls built not of stone but of silence and suspicion, a place where the past was ever present, casting its long shadow over the present. I took a sip of the whiskey, savoring the warmth that spread through me. Heard the town used to be called Jefferson. Any truth to that? I inquired, my curiosity getting the better of me. The change in name seemed to hold a story of its own, a transformation that hinted at deeper secrets, at a past that the residents seemed eager to forget. It was a question that hung in the air, a challenge to the silence that had settled over the town like a shroud. Joe's eyes narrowed slightly, and he leaned in closer, as if to ensure our conversation remained private. You've been asking questions, huh? Yeah, it was Jefferson once. Long time ago, he replied, his voice tinged with a hint of nostalgia. There was a flicker of something in his eyes, a memory perhaps, of a time before everything changed. His words carried the weight of history, of events that had shaped the town and its people in ways that were not easily undone. It was a glimpse into a world that had been, a world that had vanished but left its mark indelibly on the present. I sensed there was more to the story, so I pressed on. Why the change? I asked, eager to uncover the town's secrets. The air seemed to grow heavier, as if the very walls of the bar were listening in on our conversation. There was a sense of anticipation, as if the town itself was holding its breath, waiting to see if its secrets would finally be revealed. It was a moment suspended in time, a crossroads where the past and present converged, where the truth lay just beyond reach, waiting to be discovered. Joe hesitated for a moment, casting a furtive glance around the bar to ensure no one was eavesdropping. Legend has it, the town made a deal with the devil himself. Promised him the souls of their descendants in exchange for prosperity, he confided, his voice barely above a whisper. His words hung in the air, a chilling reminder of the darkness that lay beneath the town's surface. It was a tale as old as time, a cautionary story of ambition and its dire consequences. It was a pact that had been made in desperation, a bargain struck in the shadows, a choice that had set the town on a path from which there was no return. I raised an eyebrow, intrigued by the tale. And did they get it? I asked, leaning in closer. The idea of such a pact was both fascinating and terrifying, a testament to the lengths people would go to for a taste of success. It was a story that resonated with the human condition, the eternal struggle between desire and morality. It was a question that lingered in the air, a challenge to the silence that had settled over the town like a shroud. For a while, Joe admitted, his voice carrying the weight of history. But deals with the devil never end well. Town started dying, and folks got real suspicious of outsiders. Changed the name to Whispering Pines to try and forget, he explained, his words hanging heavily in the air. The name change seemed like an attempt to bury the past, to erase the stain of their ancestors' choices. It was a futile effort, a desperate bid to escape the inevitable consequences of their actions. The town was a living testament to the cost of ambition, a reminder that the past could never truly be forgotten, only faced. The atmosphere in the bar grew tense, and I could feel the eyes of the other patrons on me. They were listening intently, and it was clear they didn't like what they were hearing. There was an unspoken agreement among them to protect their town's secrets, to guard the truth from prying eyes. The air was thick with hostility, a palpable reminder of the town's insular nature. I finished my drink and decided it was time to leave. As I stood up, Joe gave me a hard look. Best be on your way, stranger. This town ain't friendly to outsiders, he warned, his voice carrying an unmistakable edge. It was a clear message that my presence was no longer welcome, a reminder that I had overstayed my welcome in a place that guarded its secrets fiercely. I nodded, leaving a few bills on the counter before making my way to the door. But as I stepped outside, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The streets were empty, yet I felt a presence, something dark and foreboding lurking just out of sight. The shadows seemed to stretch and twist, as if alive with the secrets they concealed. It was as if the town itself was watching, waiting to see if I would uncover the truth or leave in ignorance. The air was thick with tension, a reminder that the past was never far behind, always waiting to catch up. As I walked back to my truck, the weight of the town's history pressed down on me, like a heavy fog that refused to lift. I could feel the whispers of the past, the cries of those who had been sacrificed for a fleeting taste of prosperity. The air was thick with the echoes of their suffering, a haunting reminder of the cost of their ambition. It was a burden that the town carried, a legacy of choices made long ago that could not be undone. And as I reached my truck, I paused, turning back to look at the town one last time. In that moment, I revealed my true nature. I was not just any traveler passing through. I was the devil, returned to Whispering Pines to collect what was owed to me. The souls of the townspeople were mine, promised long ago in a desperate prayer for prosperity. The pact had been sealed, and now it was time to fulfill it. The air grew colder, and the shadows lengthened as I smiled, knowing that the time had come to fulfill the bargain. Whispering Pines would pay its debt, and I would ensure that the whispers of its past would never be forgotten. As the darkness enveloped the town, I could feel the anticipation in the air, the inevitable reckoning that was to come. The town's secrets, once buried and forgotten, would rise to the surface, and I would be there to witness it all. The cycle of promise and payment, of hope and despair, would continue, and I would remain, ever watchful, ever present, as the guardian of their fate. It was a role I had played countless times before, a reminder that the past could never truly be escaped, only faced. The town was a living testament to the cost of ambition, a reminder that the past could never truly be forgotten, only faced. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. It was supposed to be an unforgettable weekend, a camping trip with my friends that promised laughter, stories around the fire, and an escape from our mundane lives filled with work and responsibilities. Little did I know, the weekend would spiral into a nightmare that would haunt me forever, leaving scars deeper than I could have ever imagined. The sun began to set as we set up our tents, casting a warm orange glow that enveloped the woods surrounding us. The air was filled with the sound of laughter echoing through the trees, and the sweet scent of roasted marshmallows wafted around us, creating a perfect atmosphere. My girlfriend, Emma, and I sat close together, sharing smiles and whispers, while our friends exchanged light-hearted banter, completely unaware of the darkness lurking just beyond the tree line, waiting patiently for the right moment to strike. As night fell and the sky darkened, I felt an irresistible urge to explore the forest that surrounded our campsite. "I'll be right back," I told Emma, who looked at me with concern and cautioned me to stick close to the camp. But curiosity got the best of me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to discover out there. Armed with only a flashlight, I ventured deeper into the woods, the laughter of my friends fading with each step I took, replaced by an unsettling silence that hung heavily in the air. The trees stood tall and ominous, their branches resembling skeletal hands reaching out as if to grab me. I walked aimlessly, the beam of my flashlight illuminating the underbrush, trying to orient myself in this unfamiliar territory. Minutes turned into what felt like hours, and I began to wonder why I hadn't turned back. The hollow silence started to creep into my mind, making me feel increasingly uneasy, but then a soft rustling caught my attention, pulling me deeper into the darkness. I turned towards the sound and froze in place. There, standing in a small clearing, was a man, tall and thin, with ragged clothes that blended seamlessly into the shadows. His arms cradled something, and as I took a cautious step closer, I saw it was a small figure, seemingly a child, snuggled against him. For a brief moment, relief washed over me. Perhaps I wasn't lost after all, and perhaps this man could help me find my way back. "Are you okay?" I called out, my voice barely breaking the eerie stillness of the night. The man turned slowly, his face hidden beneath a hood, and my heart dropped into my stomach. As I walked closer, the light from my flashlight fell on the small figure in his arms, and it didn't take long for dread to creep into my bones like ice water. The child's head was grotesque, misshapen, and unsettling in a way that made my skin crawl. My stomach twisted in knots as the horrifying realization hit me. This was not a child at all, but something wickedly wrong, something that should not exist in this world. My instinct screamed for me to flee, but I was frozen in place, captivated by the man who began to sway back and forth, an unsettling rhythm taking hold of my senses. For reasons unknown, he began to dance. The way he moved was unnatural, every motion almost hypnotic, as if he were performing a dark ritual right before my eyes. I stood there, an unwilling observer to this horrific spectacle, my mind racing for a way out of this nightmare. And then, in a swift, grotesque transformation, the man morphed into something entirely different. His skin darkened, and his eyes glowed with an inhuman light that sent shivers down my spine. "Gabriel," he whispered, a cruel smile spreading across his face, revealing teeth that were far too sharp. "I have been waiting for you." I stumbled backward, tripping over my own feet as the sickening realization of what I was witnessing hit me like a kick to the gut. This creature, this demon, was not here by accident. It wanted something from me. My friends! The thought of them sent a surge of panic through my veins. I turned to run, my heart pounding in my chest, but the forest twisted around me, disorienting me further. I was lost in a maze of shadows and terror. Frantically, I sprinted back toward the camp, calling out for Emma and the others, desperation clawing at my throat. But as I emerged from the trees, the scene before me sent chills down my spine. They were there, my friends, but they were not themselves. They stood motionless, as if entranced by an unseen force, their eyes glazed over and fixed on something beyond my understanding, something dark and sinister. "Emma!" I shouted, a desperate plea that echoed into the night, but she didn't respond. Panic surged through me as I pushed my way through the thickening fog that surrounded the campfire. The flames flickered ominously, casting eerie shadows that danced like specters in the dark, heightening my sense of dread. I grabbed Emma's shoulders, shaking her violently, desperate for her to wake up from whatever trance held her captive. "We need to go. We have to leave," I pleaded, but there was no recognition in her eyes, only an overwhelming emptiness that chilled me to the bone. Then I heard it, a low, guttural laugh resonating from behind me, sending a jolt of fear through my body. I turned and saw Gabriel standing there, his grotesque features illuminated by the flickering firelight. "They belong to me now," he chuckled, the sound sending a chill down my spine, filling me with a sense of impending doom. "Join them, or witness their downfall." "Get away from them!" I screamed, rage and desperation fueling my courage. But my friends just stood there, their faces blank, like marionettes with their strings cut, completely under his control. With a surge of adrenaline, I grabbed Emma's hand and pulled her away from the malevolent aura that surrounded Gabriel. "Wake up!" I cried, my voice cracking with fear and urgency. Slowly, her eyes flickered with life, confusion washing over her face as she came back to reality. "Jake," she whispered, her voice trembling with uncertainty. "What's happening?" I didn't have time to explain. "We have to go. Now," I urged her, leading her away from the campfire, desperately seeking a way out of this nightmare. But Gabriel's laughter echoed behind us, growing louder and more sinister as he followed our every move. Suddenly, the woods seemed to close in around us, the trees shifting and warping, the path ahead blurring into darkness. I could feel Gabriel's presence, a sinister force that loomed over us as we stumbled through the undergrowth, his voice taunting us, echoing from multiple directions, making it impossible to pinpoint where he was. "Do you think you can escape? They've seen the beauty of despair, and now it's your turn." We ran, hearts racing, driven by sheer terror. Every instinct told me to keep moving, to not look back, but the sounds of my friend's laughter mixed with Gabriel's malevolent whisper sent my mind spiraling into chaos. Were they really following him now, or were they lost forever in his grasp, trapped in a nightmare of his making? As we broke through the tree line, the moonlight illuminated a wider path ahead, and I spotted a flicker of hope, a narrow creek that could lead us back to safety. "This way," I urged Emma, pulling her forward with all my strength. We reached the water's edge, and I dared to glance back, my heart pounding with fear. In that heartbeat, I saw him, Gabriel, standing at the tree line, his eyes glowing with the fire of 1,000 tormented souls. He gestured with a long, bony finger, and I felt a wave of despair wash over me, threatening to pull me under. I couldn't let him win. Without hesitating, we plunged into the icy water, the current pulling us downstream with a force that felt almost supernatural. I fought against it, dragging Emma along as we swam, the chilling sensation snapping me back to reality. We needed to keep moving, to stay ahead of whatever darkness pursued us. The darkness closed in around us, but we were determined to escape. We surfaced, breathless and shivering, and continued to fight our way through the murky water, the sounds of the camp fading into the background, replaced by the rush of the current and our frantic breaths. Just when I thought we might be free, a voice echoed behind us, tantalizing and cruel, cutting through the night like a knife. "You cannot escape what you are. They will always be drawn back to the darkness." I took Emma's hand tightly, pulling her to a rise on the other side of the creek. We clambered out, our bodies cold and shaken, but we kept going, the path ahead still uncertain and fraught with danger. I could feel the weight of impending doom pressing down on us, like a shadow following our every step, waiting for the moment to strike. In the distance, I spotted the dim glow of a cabin. It seemed like a beacon, a place where we could find safety and perhaps a chance to regroup. "There!" I pointed, my voice hoarse from exertion and fear. Every step felt eternal as we rushed toward the cabin, the door creaking open as we stumbled inside, collapsing against the wall, panting and terrified. But the moment felt fleeting. In the silence, I sensed it, Gabriel was not far behind. The door creaked open slowly, and panic surged within me. I pulled Emma close, hoping we could find a way to barricade ourselves inside, to fortify our defenses against the nightmare that was pursuing us. Suddenly, I remembered the stories we had heard around the campfire about dark rituals and ancient incantations that could repel evil. My mind raced. If there was any truth to those tales, we needed to find something, anything, to defend ourselves against the malevolent force that sought to claim us. In the dim light of the cabin, I searched frantically, my heart racing as I rifled through old books and dusty shelves. One book caught my eye, leather-bound and worn, with strange symbols etched into the cover that felt both ancient and powerful. Emma! I called, my heart pounding as I found her huddled in a corner, looking between the door and me with wide, terrified eyes. I think I found something. As I opened the book, the words began to swim before my eyes, a jumble of ancient text that felt foreign and yet strangely familiar. I could barely decipher what it said, but I felt a surge of energy pulsating from the pages, a warmth that contrasted sharply with the cold dread surrounding us. Gabriel's presence loomed closer, and I knew I had to act fast to protect us. I scanned the pages for anything resembling a protective incantation, my heartbeat quickening as I stumbled upon a phrase that felt right, an ancient invocation, meant to summon light against encroaching shadows and darkness. "Stay close!" I shouted to Emma, my voice steadying as I took a deep breath, trying to project confidence in the face of overwhelming fear. I turned toward the door, the darkness pressing against me like a living entity, and spoke the words with all the conviction I could muster, pouring my soul into the incantation. The air shimmered, and a bright light erupted from the book, flooding the cabin with a brilliance that pushed back the darkness. I could see Gabriel's expression shift to one of rage, his form warping as the light clashed violently with shadows that sought to engulf us. And oh, he screamed, an otherworldly sound that seemed to shake the very foundations of the cabin, reverberating through the walls and into my bones. As the light intensified, I felt hope surge through me, burning brighter than any fear. I glanced back at Emma, whose eyes shone with determination, reflecting the brilliance around us. We were not alone in this fight. The memories of every laugh, every moment shared with our friends anchored us against the encroaching darkness, reminding us of what we were fighting for. Together! I shouted, raising the book higher, channeling everything we had into this light that pulsed with energy. The cabin vibrated with power, illuminating every crack and crevice as Gabriel's form writhed against the brilliance, his laughter turning into cries of despair that echoed through the night. With a final, deafening roar, the light enveloped him, casting him back into the shadows from whence he came, banishing the darkness that sought to claim us. And just like that, the oppressive weight of fear lifted, leaving us breathless and free. We stood there, panting heavily, the cabin silent around us. The oppressive weight had vanished, leaving only the echo of our racing hearts and the fading remnants of terror. I collapsed to the ground, exhausted but liberated, and Emma knelt beside me, a shaky smile breaking across her face, a glimmer of hope shining in her eyes. "Is it over?" she whispered, hope lingering in her voice like a fragile flower in the wind. I nodded slowly, my heart still racing from the adrenaline and the fear that had gripped me moments before. "I think so. For now," I replied, the weight of the experience settling in. We took a moment gathered in silence, the magnitude of what we had faced sinking in like a stone in still water. The forest beyond the cabin was dark, but it no longer felt threatening. I could hear the distant sound of laughter and chatter, a reminder that life continued beyond this harrowing experience, that we had survived against all odds. Hand in hand, we stepped outside, breathing in the fresh air of endless possibilities, the cool night air filling our lungs with renewed hope. In the heart of fear and despair, we had found our strength, an unyielding bond forged in the darkest of nights. Although the experience had changed us forever, we emerged together, ready to face whatever lay ahead, together, stronger than we had ever been before. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. I had always prided myself on my ability to navigate the murky waters of human nature, to understand the complexities that lie beneath the surface. As a seasoned detective, I had seen my fair share of darkness intruding into the lives of innocents, but nothing could prepare me for the case that lay ahead. It began on a damp autumn morning when the air was thick with moisture, and I received a call that would lead me into the depths of a mystery that had long been buried, like a hidden relic from the past, waiting to be unearthed. The victim was a young woman, no more than 25, whose life had been extinguished far too soon and far too brutally. Her body was discovered in the dreary basement of an abandoned church on the outskirts of town, a place that once might have been filled with laughter and hope, but was now a hollow shell. The moment I stepped into that desolate sanctuary, an overwhelming sense of the weight of its history pressed down on me like a heavy shroud. The air was thick with a musty odor, a pungent reminder of neglect, and the dim light barely illuminated the crumbling walls that were adorned with faded murals, each brushstroke telling stories of a bygone era, of prayers whispered and faith once vibrant. As I approached the body, the sight was haunting and almost surreal. She lay there on the cold, unforgiving stone floor, her long hair splayed around her like a dark halo of despair. But it was the marks on her neck that captured my attention, two distinct impressions, like bruises, as if someone had gripped her tightly in a moment of desperation, fury, or perhaps even fear. My instincts kicked in immediately, igniting a fire of determination within me, as I began to piece together the fragments of her final moments, which felt like scattered puzzle pieces begging to be assembled. I examined the area around her meticulously, searching for any clues that might shed light on her tragic fate. My eyes were drawn to a silver cross, charred and twisted, lying a few feet away from her lifeless form. It seemed so completely out of place in this desolate setting, a relic of faith now forever marred by the darkness that had unfolded here, a perverse irony in what should have been a sanctified space. I picked it up gingerly, feeling the cold metal bite against my skin, and noticed something etched into the wall behind where she had been found. Scratched hastily and with urgency, the letters formed a single word that sent a shiver down my spine: redemption. What could it possibly mean? I felt a knot tighten in my stomach as I contemplated the dire implications of that word scrawled in such a frantic manner. I had learned over the years that symbols often held the key to understanding the motives that lurk behind a crime, the psychology of the perpetrator. The cross, the word, were they connected in some nefarious way? I couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that I was on the verge of uncovering something significant, something that could either lead me to the truth or deeper into a web of deceit. As I delved deeper into the investigation, I discovered that the young woman, whose name was Emily, had been a local artist known for her vibrant paintings, which breathed life into the gray, drab streets of our town. Her art had once brought joy and inspiration to many, but as I spoke with her friends and family, a different and darker picture began to emerge. They described her as someone who had recently become withdrawn, haunted by shadows that seemed to follow her everywhere, unwanted ghosts from her past. It was as if she had been fighting her own demons, perhaps those from within and outside, and I couldn't help but wonder if those demons had finally caught up with her. Days turned into nights as I scoured through Emily's life, piecing together fragments of her story, like an archaeologist digging for truth buried beneath layers of despair. I learned that she had been involved with a group of individuals who dabbled in the occult, those who sought answers to questions that were often better left unasked. My gut told me that this was no mere coincidence. The cross, the word on the wall, these were not just random artifacts. They were breadcrumbs leading me down a dark and twisted path. Each new revelation felt like a step further into a chilling narrative that had begun decades before. With resolve, I returned to the church, determined to find more answers and to uncover the layers of mystery that clung to the place like a fog. The atmosphere was even more oppressive than before, thickening around me as if the very walls were closing in with a malevolent intent. I set up my recording device, hoping to capture any sounds or whispers that might reveal the truth lying dormant in the darkness. As I moved through the shadows, I felt an inexplicable presence, a sensation that I was not alone in this forsaken space, as if eyes unseen were observing my every move. I wandered deeper into the basement, the flickering light of my flashlight casting eerie shadows on the walls, creating an unsettling dance of shapes that felt alive. Suddenly, I stumbled upon a hidden door, partially concealed by debris, as if it had been intentionally forgotten. My heart raced with both fear and excitement as I pushed it open, revealing a narrow staircase that descended further into the darkness, deeper than I had anticipated. With each hesitant step down, I felt a mix of dread and anticipation, knowing that whatever lay ahead could change everything. The air grew colder as I reached the bottom, chilling me to the bone, and I found myself in a small chamber filled with remnants of rituals long forgotten, artifacts of despair and sorrow that had left their marks. Candles, dried herbs, and strange symbols adorned the walls, echoing with secrets yearning to be uncovered. In the center of the room stood an altar, and my breath caught in my throat as I realized what it was, a place where lives had been sacrificed in the name of something sinister, a grisly honor to forgotten forces. It was surreal, and for a moment I felt the weight of those who had come before. I recorded my thoughts, my voice trembling as I spoke into the device, trying to remain professional even as fear crept in. This is David, back in the church. I've discovered a hidden chamber, and it feels like a shrine to something dark. I need to document everything, in case I don't make it out of here. The last words were heavy on my tongue, a grim reminder that I was walking a line that few would tread. As I turned to leave, feeling the urgency of my situation, a sudden chill enveloped me like a thick fog. I felt a presence behind me, a whisper that seemed to echo through the chamber, chilling me to the core. "Help me!" The voice was faint and eerie, but it pierced through the silence, sending an icy jolt of fear down my spine. I spun around, desperate to fight the terror rising within me, but there was nothing, only shadows dancing in the flickering light, taunting me. My instinct screamed at me to flee, to abandon this place filled with unexplainable horror, but I couldn't bring myself to leave Emily behind. I had to understand what had really happened to her, to uncover the truth that had been buried in this forsaken place, shrouded in neglect and suffering. I returned to the altar, searching through the remnants, hoping to find clues that might lead me to her killer and bring some semblance of closure to her tragic story. Among the remnants of a sad past, I found a journal, its pages filled with frantic scribbles and drawings that mirrored Emily's art, echoing her artistry but marred by fear. As I flipped through the pages, I felt a profound connection to her, a glimpse into her troubled mind. She had been searching for something, perhaps redemption or a way to escape the darkness that had consumed her life and creativity. The last entry sent chills down my spine, and a lump formed in my throat. They want to take me. I can feel them closing in. I must find a way to break free. The desperation in her words echoed my own feelings of urgency. Suddenly, the temperature plunged, and I could see my breath in the air like wisps of ghostly fog. I sensed that I was no longer alone. The shadows swirled menacingly, and I felt an immense weight pressing down on me, as if the very essence of the place was trying to suffocate me, drawing me into its depths. Panic surged through me, but I fought to stay focused, reminding myself that I had to get out, to share what I had found, to give a voice to Emily's plight. I hurried back up the staircase, my heart pounding in my chest like a war drum. As I reached the top, a loud crash echoed through the church, causing me to jump, startled. I turned to see the door I had entered through slam shut with a deafening bang, trapping me inside the oppressive silence. I was engulfed in darkness, the only flicker of light coming from the trembling candle on the altar, casting an eerie glow around the enclosed space. "Emily?" I called out, my voice trembling as it broke through the suffocating silence.
"Is that you?" But there was no response, only the relentless sound of my own heartbeat echoing in the stillness, a reminder of my isolation in this haunted edifice. I felt a surge of determination rise within me, fueling the fire against the dread that threatened to overwhelm me. I wouldn't let fear control me, not now, not after coming so far. I had to confront whatever malevolent force resided in this place, to shine a light in the deepest shadows. I returned to the altar, clutching the journal tightly, the weight of its pages heavy with emotion. "If you're here, show yourself!" I shouted, my voice resonating through the chamber in a bold declaration against the darkness. The air crackled with energy, with a charged intensity that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. For a moment, I felt a presence, an overwhelming rush of emotions that were not my own. Fear, sadness, desperation. It was as if Emily's spirit was reaching out to me, begging for release from the pain that bound her. I closed my eyes, focusing on her pain, her longing for peace and freedom, a desire that transcended the boundaries of life and death. "Emily, I promise I'll find you," I whispered, my voice barely audible as I uttered vows into the void. "I won't let your story end here, not in this shadowed chamber." The shadows began to swirl around me, and I felt a warmth enveloping my heart, igniting a spark of hope within me. In that moment, I understood that I was not just a detective in pursuit of a case. I was a vessel for her truth, the conduit through which her story would be told. With newfound resolve, I opened my eyes, taking a deep breath to steady my racing heart. I would expose the darkness that had taken her life and unravel the web of deceit that had ensnared her. I would bring her story to light, ensuring that her voice would never be silenced. I understood that this was not just about finding a murderer, it was about honoring Emily's spirit and the memories of those like her who had suffered unseen. As I made my way back to the entrance, the door creaked open, revealing the outside world bathed in the soft glow of dawn. I stepped into the light, feeling a sense of clarity wash over me, chased away the remnants of fear and despair that had threatened to engulf me. The shadows of the church lingered behind me, but I knew with certainty that I had emerged stronger and more resolute than before, a warrior for the truth. In the days that followed, I dedicated myself wholeheartedly to uncovering the truth that had eluded me, interviewing those who had been close to Emily, piecing together the fragments of her life, much like a puzzle that had been scattered across time and memory. I discovered that her involvement with the occult had drawn her into a dangerous web of manipulation and betrayal, ensnaring her as she sought answers to questions that ultimately led to her demise. The group she had trusted, a circle of supposed friends, had turned on her, seeking to use her talent for their own gain, leading her to despair. With each revelation, I felt a sense of urgency grow like a tide threatening to overtake me. I had to confront those responsible for her death, to bring them to justice, to ensure that her life had not been lost in vain. The investigation culminated in a confrontation that shook the very foundations of our town, shaking loose lies that had been buried for far too long. As I stood in the courtroom, the weight of Emily's story hung heavy in the air around me. Her presence felt like a palpable force, as if she were standing at my side, guiding me through the darkness I had promised to expose. In the end, justice prevailed, but it was bittersweet. The shadows that had haunted Emily's life were now exposed for all to see, but the scars remained, etched into the fabric of our community. I vowed to honor her memory, to keep her spirit alive through my work, and to advocate for those who could not speak for themselves. The church, once a place of despair and pain, had become a symbol of resilience, a stark reminder that even in the darkest corners of existence, light could still break through, illuminating paths once thought lost. As I walked away from the courthouse, the weight of my resolve solidified each step. Emily's story would not be forgotten. I would weave her tale into my own, allowing it to propel me forward in my quest for justice. I would continue to fight for those who could not fight for themselves, to seek the truth in a world that often preferred to look away from the uncomfortable realities that lurk beneath the surface. The shadows may linger, but I would stand as a beacon of hope, a voice for the voiceless. And in that moment, surrounded by the dawn that signaled new beginnings, I knew that I had found my own redemption. I had gone into the depths of darkness and emerged transformed, forged by the experiences of fear and resolve. I would carry Emily's spirit with me, a guiding light as I ventured into the future, forever changed by a case that had opened my eyes to both the fragility and resilience of the human spirit. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. I had often heard the tales whispered among the villagers, tales of witches who roamed the woods, lurking in the shadows, and seeking out the fearful. These stories were passed down through generations, each telling more chilling than the last, warning us to be cautious and aware of our surroundings. The elders would gather around the fire, their voices low and serious, recounting the dangers that lay just beyond the edge of the village, where the trees grew thick and the light barely penetrated. It was said that if you ever encountered one of these witches, you shouldn't run, for they had an uncanny ability to sense your fear, and that fear would only make them more powerful. Yet, despite all the warnings and the chilling anecdotes, I found myself completely unprepared for the chilling reality of that fateful day when I unexpectedly came face to face with her. It was a crisp autumn afternoon, the air heavy with the scent of fallen leaves, decay, and the unmistakable hint of impending winter. The sky was a brilliant blue, dotted with wispy clouds that seemed to dance in the gentle breeze. As I wandered deeper into the forest, seeking solace among the trees, I felt the familiar weight of solitude wrapping around me like a comforting cloak. I had always sought refuge in nature, where the whispering trees and rustling leaves became my only companions, providing a sense of peace that I could not find elsewhere. But today, something felt different, as if the very ground beneath me was holding its breath, anticipating something unknown and foreboding. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted dramatically, as if a storm was brewing just beyond my sight. The vibrant colors of the forest dulled, as if a veil of gray had been drawn over the landscape, and an unsettling silence enveloped me, pressing in like a physical force, heavy and oppressive. It was in that eerie stillness that I saw her, a figure cloaked in shadows, standing among the tangled branches like a specter emerging from a nightmare. Her eyes gleamed like polished obsidian, dark and mesmerizing, and an aura of power surrounded her, making the air crackle with electricity. A witch, just as the old stories had warned, a living embodiment of the fears that had haunted my childhood. Despite the primal urge to flee, to turn and run as fast as I could, my instinct screaming at me to escape, I recalled the words I'd heard from the elders in the village: "Don't run. Don't show your fear." So, I stood there, rooted to the spot, trembling yet determined to mask my terror. The witch's gaze pierced through me, as if she was unearthing my innermost thoughts, stripping away my defenses layer by layer. My heart raced wildly, pounding in my chest like a drum, a frantic rhythm that echoed in my ears, but I forced myself to breathe deeply, to calm the chaotic storm that raged inside my mind, willing myself to remain composed. "Why do you linger here, child?" she asked, her voice a silky whisper that slithered into my ears, enticing yet menacing, each word dripping with a dark allure. It wrapped around me like a vine, threatening to ensnare my will and pull me closer. I felt the weight of her words pressing down on me, the subtle pull towards her that threatened to overwhelm my senses, drawing me into her web of manipulation. Despite every instinct urging me to speak, to plead for mercy, to beg her to let me go, I knew better. Instead, I remained silent, giving nothing away, determined to keep my thoughts and emotions hidden, to shield my very essence from her probing. "Do you not wish to know the secrets of the world?" she continued, her voice dripping with dark allure, wrapping around me like a serpent ready to strike. Visions of power, forbidden knowledge, and unimaginable wealth danced before my eyes, tempting me to reach out and grasp them, to surrender to the seductive promises she offered. But I forced myself to shake my head, resolutely denying her offer, standing firm in my convictions. I was not here for her promises, not here to barter my soul for fleeting desires that could lead to my ruin and despair. In her presence, I felt as if my very thoughts were laid bare for her to examine, scrutinized under her watchful gaze. I concentrated fiercely, pushing back against the tide of her influence that threatened to pull me under, to drown me in her darkness. I envisioned a brick wall rising within my mind, an impenetrable fortress guarding my true self from her probing gaze, a stronghold that would keep my essence safe from her manipulation. "You cannot take what is mine," I silently declared, bolstering my resolve, reminding myself of my strength, of the power I held within. The witch chuckled softly, a sound that sent shivers down my spine, reverberating in the stillness of the forest like a chilling breeze. "So stubborn, yet so naive," she replied, tilting her head slightly, as if studying an intriguing specimen, a curious expression crossing her features. "You think you can hide from me? From the truth?" Her words wrapped around me, insidious and suffocating, but I remained steadfast, refusing to let her break my spirit, to penetrate the defenses I had built. As the minutes stretched into an eternity, I sensed a shift in her demeanor, a subtle change that hinted at her waning interest. She seemed to lose focus, her attention drawn to something unseen in the depths of the forest, as if she were distracted by a thought or a memory that had suddenly captured her mind. I seized the moment, my heart pounding in my chest, a wild rhythm that urged me to act. I didn't turn to look back or check her movements. I just knew I had to escape. I slipped away quietly, the crunch of leaves underfoot drowned by the growing distance between us, each step taking me further from her grasp, from her dark influence. With every step, I felt the remnants of her power receding, like a tide pulling back from the shore, leaving only the calm of the sea behind. I didn't dare stop until I reached a clearing bathed in sunlight, a stark contrast to the darkness I had just escaped. The warmth of the sun felt like a blessing, a shield against the chill that lingered in my bones, wrapping me in its golden embrace. I had avoided the witch this time, but I was left with a haunting realization. She would always be able to find me if I allowed fear to take root in my heart, if I ever let my guard down and succumbed to the shadows. Days turned into weeks, yet the encounter lingered in my mind like a ghost that refused to be exorcised, haunting my thoughts and dreams. I tried to resume my normal life, to shake off the lingering dread that clung to me like a second skin, but I was haunted by the notion of what she could have done to me, what she still could do if I let my defenses slip. Each sound in the forest, each rustle of leaves, echoed with her voice, the silky tones still tickling my consciousness in the quiet moments of the night, reminding me of the danger that lurked in the shadows. I knew I had to protect myself further. I began to research tales of witches, gathering stories from the village elders, anything I could find to fortify my understanding and prepare myself for a potential second encounter. The more I learned, the more equipped I felt to face the darkness that threatened to engulf me. I discovered that witches conspired in whispers, feeding on the fear of others and weaving their magic through manipulation and deceit, drawing strength from the terror they instilled in their victims. I read about symbols of protection and learned to create my own amulets, charms infused with intent to guard my essence from those who sought to claim it. Each new piece of knowledge was like armor, reinforcing my resolve and bolstering my spirit, empowering me to stand firm against the encroaching shadows. But as fate would have it, my efforts could not shield me from the unpredictability of life. One evening, while gathering herbs at the edge of the forest, I found myself lost in thought, crafting plans for my next protection charm, my mind racing with possibilities and strategies. That smoke and mirrors world of hers loomed at the back of my mind, and I could feel it beckoning me, urging me to look back over my shoulder just once, to see if she was truly gone, if I had truly escaped her grasp. When I finally did, there she was again, the witch, emerging from the shadows like a wraith, as if she had been waiting for me all along, hidden just out of sight. I felt that same terrifying pull, the instinct to run battling with the knowledge I had gained in the weeks since our last encounter. She tilted her head, her expression unreadable, neither anger nor satisfaction in her gaze. Instead, there was a flicker of something else, a challenge, a game she was eager to play, a dangerous dance on a razor's edge. "Have you forgotten me, dear child?" Her voice, though honeyed, dripped with unspoken threat, a sinister undertone that sent chills down my spine, igniting the fear I had worked so hard to suppress. "You cannot evict me from your thoughts. The moment you felt fear, a bond was formed. You cannot escape what you invite into your life." Her words resonated with a truth that made my heart sink, but I clenched my fists, refusing to let the panic swell inside me. "You may haunt the dreams of the fearful, but you cannot control me," I declared, my voice steadier than I felt, a flicker of defiance igniting within me, fueling my determination. The knowledge I had gathered surged within me, channeling strength I barely recognized, a fire that burned bright against the darkness. "Is that so?" she replied, her interest piqued, a glimmer of amusement dancing in her dark eyes, as if she found my defiance entertaining. "Then let us play a game, shall we?" Before I could respond, she waved her hand, and the world around us shimmered, transformed into a landscape of shadows and whispers, a realm where reality twisted and turned like a serpent, coiling around me. Here, within this dark realm, I could feel her power intensifying, warping reality itself, bending it to her will, threatening to ensnare me once more. I was trapped, yet a flicker of defiance burned within me, refusing to be extinguished by the darkness that surrounded me. "You play games, witch, but I will not be your pawn," I stated, though my heart quaked at the thought of losing myself in her world, becoming yet another victim of her dark magic, another soul claimed by her insatiable hunger. And so, I closed my eyes and envisioned that brick wall again, stronger than before, fortified with every lesson I had learned through my research and my encounters with her. In this timeless void, the wall expanded, growing higher and thicker, solid in its presence, an unyielding barrier between her influence and my spirit. I clung to the purity of my intent, wrapping it around my essence like a cloak, a shield against her probing gaze, a safeguard against her dark magic. "You have no power over what you cannot see," I proclaimed, my voice resonating through the shadows, echoing with a confidence I had not felt before, a declaration of my strength. For a moment, there was silence, a pause that stretched into infinity, as if the universe itself held its breath, waiting for the outcome of this confrontation. Then she laughed, a sound that echoed through the void and shook the very fabric of reality, reverberating in my bones, a chilling reminder of the threat she posed. "You think you can hide from me forever? There will always be new children, new souls to replace you, should you falter," she taunted, her voice dripping with malice, a sinister promise that sent a shiver down my spine. With that, her form began to dissolve into wisps of dark smoke, retreating into the unknown, her laughter lingering like a haunting melody that echoed in my mind. I felt the pressure surrounding me wane, and just like that, the world returned to its normal color, the sunlight once again bathing the forest in warm hues, a welcome embrace after the darkness I had faced, a reminder of the light that still existed. I stood alone, breathless, but a fire flickered within me now, a newfound strength ignited by my defiance, a light that pushed back against the shadows. The encounter had taught me that while fear could bond me to the witch, courage could sever those ties, cutting through the darkness that threatened to consume me. I could be the master of my fate, the guardian of my soul, and I realized that I had the power to shape my own destiny. I might encounter her again, but I knew I would be ready, armed with the knowledge I had gained and the strength I had discovered within myself, prepared to stand my ground. The years passed, and the haunting memories ebbed and flowed like the tides, sometimes crashing over me, sometimes receding into the background, a constant reminder of my encounter with the witch. But each time I ventured into the woods, I remembered her words, the reminder that fear could draw her closer, while my inner strength could keep her at bay, a delicate balance that I had to maintain. And so, I continued to walk the forest paths, unyielding and steadfast, preparing myself for whatever might come next, determined to face whatever challenges lay ahead. I would not be forgotten, nor would I allow a new child to take my place in her twisted game of power and manipulation. In this dance with the witch, I would learn to embrace the light within me, making it so bright that even the darkest shadows would dare not approach. I had faced her once, and I would face her again, on my own terms, with my own strength, ready to defend the light against the encroaching darkness, to protect not only myself, but also those who might falter in the face of fear. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. I have been a single father for as long as I can remember, and my son, Ethan, has always been the light of my life. He brought joy and laughter into our home, filling it with the kind of warmth that made every day feel like a gift. However, recently, a dark cloud has overshadowed our little world, casting a long shadow over our lives. His behavior has changed dramatically, and I can't shake the feeling that something is terribly wrong. I find myself constantly glancing at Ethan, searching for the vibrant boy who once bubbled over with laughter and endless questions. Now, all I see is a silence that echoes in the corners of our home, a silence that feels heavy and unsettling. It all started a few weeks ago on a particularly chilly night. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows and creating an eerie atmosphere that seeped into the walls of our home. I was comfortably settled in the living room, engrossed in a book, when I noticed Ethan standing silently at the front door, his back turned to me. Usually, he would rush to my side, eager to hear about the dragons and heroes from the pages of my story, but on this evening, he just stood there, motionless, as if he were frozen in time. "Ethan?" I called out, my voice wavering with concern. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach as I waited for a response that didn't come. I approached him slowly, my heart pounding in my chest as I reached out to touch his shoulder, desperate to break the spell that seemed to hold him captive. Just before my fingers brushed against him, he turned around abruptly, his eyes wide and unblinking. They held a depth that seemed impossible for a child his age, a depth that sent shivers down my spine. "Are you okay, buddy?" I asked gently, trying to peer into his troubled thoughts. He nodded slowly, but the look on his face was far from assuring. It was as if he were trapped in a world I couldn't access. I wanted to ask him what was wrong, but the words caught in my throat, tangled in my fear and confusion. Instead, I led him back inside, tucking him into bed, brushing his hair from his forehead where I felt the tiny beads of sweat forming, a sign of his distress. Days turned into nights, and the cycle repeated itself with an unsettling regularity. Each evening, Ethan would stand by the door, unfaltering and ghostly, as if he were a sentinel guarding against something unseen. I tried to engage him in conversation, asking about his day at school or what games he played with his friends, but he would merely nod or shake his head, his gaze drifting to some unseen point in the darkness. The silence began to gnaw at my insides, creating a chasm between us that I couldn't bridge. Then, one particularly unsettling night, I awoke to find him sitting on the edge of my bed, staring at me with an intensity that made my heart race. The moonlight streamed through the window, illuminating his small frame, yet he appeared like a shadow haunting the corners of my dreams, an apparition that I couldn't quite comprehend. My heart raced as I sat up, grasping for my bearings, trying to shake off the remnants of sleep that clung to me like a fog. "Ethan? What's going on?" I asked, my voice thick with sleep and concern, but there was no answer. My son remained silent, his eyes locked onto mine, unblinking as if he were searching for something I couldn't understand. I reached out, wanting to reassure him, but he recoiled slightly, causing an uneasy chill to creep down my spine. It was a simple gesture, but it felt like a barrier had been erected between us, a wall that I couldn't break down. That was when the doubts started to invade my mind like unwelcome intruders. I began to question every interaction we had, every moment we shared. Was he hiding something from me? Surely, children often have secrets, but his behavior felt so heavy, as though he was carrying the weight of the world on his small shoulders. I found myself worrying about his mother, who had passed away a few years back. Did Ethan know something about her that I didn't? The thought sent a wave of dread crashing over me, and I felt helpless, unable to reach him. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was a connection between his newfound silence and the ghost of memories that lingered in our home, memories that were both precious and painful. I tried to talk to him about his mother, about how she used to sing him lullabies and read him stories, hoping to coax a response from him, to hear his voice again, even if it were just a few words. But instead, all I got was silence, a deafening silence that echoed in my heart. Each night, as my anxiety mounted, I began to wonder if perhaps Ethan was experiencing the supernatural. Was he communicating with spirits? The notion seemed irrational, but the longer the silence stretched, the more plausible it became. I found myself tiptoeing around our home, speaking softly, as if the very air around me was fragile, as if raising my voice might shatter the delicate balance we were trying to maintain. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, I noticed Ethan standing in the doorway once again, but this time, he wasn't alone. A faint shadow flitted behind him, barely visible but undeniably present. My breath caught in my throat as I dropped the spoon from my hand, the clatter surprising Ethan out of his trance. He blinked a few times, as though waking up from a deep sleep, and I felt a surge of panic wash over me. "Did you see that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, but Ethan merely shook his head and stepped back into the kitchen, his expression vacant and distant. I wanted to yell, to shake him and force him to tell me what he was hiding, yet all I could do was watch as he returned to his usual place at the table, staring blankly at his unfinished homework, lost in a world of his own. Days bled into one another, and the silence grew thicker, more oppressive, wrapping around us like a suffocating blanket. There were moments when I believed I could hear whispers just at the edges of my hearing, like a far-off lullaby or the gentle hum of a lull. I started talking to the shadows, too, pretending they were old friends visiting me in my time of need. The kitchen became a sanctuary of sorts. I filled the silence with the clattering of plates and the bubbling of pots, trying to drown out my fears with the mundane sounds of daily life. But as much as I tried to stay grounded, things escalated beyond what I could manage. One night, I couldn't sleep. The air felt heavy, oppressive, as if it were infused with an unshakable tension. I crept into Ethan's room, half expecting to find him lost in his dreams, but instead, he was sitting up, staring at the wall with an intensity that made my heart twist painfully in my chest. "Ethan, sweetheart, you need to talk to me," I urged gently, sitting beside him on the edge of the bed. "Whatever it is, we can face it together." I hoped my words would break through the silence that had enveloped him. He turned to me, and for the first time in weeks, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes, a spark of recognition, perhaps. But before I could hold on to it, he blinked again, and the light vanished as quickly as it had appeared, leaving only the shadows behind. "Daddy, I see her," he finally murmured, breaking the silence that had become so familiar. The words hung in the air, charged with tension, and my pulse quickened at the revelation. "Who do you see, Ethan?" My voice shook slightly, grasping for control over my racing heart, desperate to understand what he was experiencing. "The lady in the window," he replied softly, pointing to the curtain that fluttered slightly in the night breeze. "She comes at night, when you're sleeping." Fear coursed through my veins as I questioned the nature of his visions. What did he mean by the lady? Was it his mother? The thought both terrified and comforted me, creating a whirlwind of emotions within me. "Ethan, what does she say?" I pressed, desperate to understand the connection he had with this mysterious figure. But he simply shrugged, a forlorn expression crossing his face. "I don't know." "She's sad. I think she wants to go home." The revelation struck me like a bolt of lightning, illuminating the darkness that had settled over us. Was my son somehow in tune with the remnants of the past? Unraveling before me was a truth I wasn't prepared to face. For days, I had fought the encroaching shadows, but now it felt as though I was grappling with something far more profound, something that challenged my understanding of reality. I decided to confront the silence head-on, to face the darkness that had invaded our lives. "Ethan, let's talk to her together," I proposed in a firm yet reassuring tone. "Maybe she needs our help." His eyes widened with a combination of fear and intrigue, and after a moment's hesitation, he nodded, a flicker of hope igniting within me. That night, we set ourselves up in the living room, surrounded by candles and an assortment of stuffed animals that had once brought him comfort. With each flickering flame, I felt a newfound determination surge within me to pierce the veil of silence that had entrapped us for far too long. As the hours passed, I instructed Ethan to speak to the shadows. I encouraged him to ask questions, to convey messages, to express anything that would bridge the gap between our world and the ethereal. I, too, joined him, pouring out my heart into the flickering lights and embracing the chilling stillness that enveloped us. It felt like a ritual, a way to reclaim our voices from the clutches of fear. With each breath, I felt the air shift, a palpable energy weaving through the room, wrapping around us like a protective cocoon. The shadows danced, and suddenly, I heard it, the softest whisper carried on the breeze, brushing against my skin like a caress, a promise of understanding. "Let her go," it murmured, echoing the sentiment that had been haunting us both, a plea that resonated deep within my soul. Tears formed in my eyes as I realized the truth. Ethan's silence was steeped not in fear, but in an understanding that transcended the physical. Together, we began to chant, our voices weaving a tapestry of hope that cut through the solitude that had enveloped us for so long. "I release you," I whispered, feeling the weight on my heart lift. "You're free to go." As the last syllable faded into the night, the room transformed. The air felt lighter, the shadows less daunting. I glanced over at Ethan, who wore a calm expression, a tranquility that soothed my frayed nerves and filled me with a sense of relief. From that moment on, everything shifted. Ethan began to engage with the world again. The silence melted away like morning mist under the sun, dissipating the darkness that had once loomed over us. We laughed, we spoke, and even though the memories of the darkness lingered like ghosts in the corners of our minds, the lessons we learned dwelled within our hearts, reminding us of our resilience. What had once been a ghost of the past had transformed into a connection, a reminder that we are never truly alone, even in the shadows. And in that silence, I discovered our bond had only grown stronger, anchoring us despite the weight of loss that had once threatened to consume us. The flickering days became our story, a testament to facing the unknown together, hand in hand. I had once feared the silence, but now, I embraced the whispers that danced in the corners of our home, knowing that they were guiding us to a brighter tomorrow, illuminating our path as we moved forward into the light, together. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. In the small, desolate town of Juneau, Alaska, where the howling wind whispered through the skeletal trees and the freezing waters lay glistening menacingly under the ghostly moonlight, I found myself living a simple yet profoundly solitary existence. I was merely known as Old Man George, a title that carries a profound weight, synonymous with age, sorrow, and deep-rooted solitude. My only faithful companion through it all was Baxter, a golden retriever whose fur shimmered like the sun on the rare crystal-clear days when it managed to break through the thick, gray clouds that often blanketed our skies. My life, which had been marked by a dull routine, took a tragic turn one fateful day when my only son, Thomas, set out to the river for what should have been just a simple fishing trip. He was a bright soul, filled with boundless potential and dreams of conquering the entire world beyond the confines of our small town. But that day, destiny decided to take an unexpected and cruel turn. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the land, I stood on our rickety porch, eagerly anticipating his return, blissfully unaware that I would never see him alive again. As the hours crept by, stretching into what felt like an eternity, the shadows grew long and twisted around me like wraiths. Panic clawed at my insides, replacing the hope I felt only moments before. I ventured toward the river, my heart pounding in my chest as I felt the unsettling chill of dread wash over me. The air was thick with an oppressive silence, only occasionally broken by the rustle of leaves stirred by a deceptive breeze. Upon reaching the water's edge, I stumbled upon Thomas's fishing gear scattered across the shore, and my heart sank, welling with an understanding that twisted in my chest like a dagger. I shouted his name until my voice turned hoarse and raw, but all that echoed back to me was the chilling sound of water lapping against the rocks, a sound that now felt ominous and foreboding. The search for my son ended tragically the next day. They pulled his lifeless body from the depths of the river. The smiling face I had nurtured and watched grow into a promising young man was now a haunting reminder of loss. All that remained was the shell of a boy who could have become so much more, taken too soon. It was at that moment that I began to hear the whispers. The townsfolk spoke in hushed tones about a creature in the waters, an ancient beast supposedly known to lure souls to drown them in its depths. They called it the Water Shroud, a name that sent chills racing down my spine as the implications of such a thing began to settle in my mind. I refused to accept that Thomas's death was simply an accident. I couldn't bear the thought that my beloved boy was taken from me by mere misfortune. With each passing hour, I became consumed by rage, a deep-seated anger that ignited a fire within me that was both terrifying and invigorating. The townsfolk offered their condolences and attempted to edge me toward acceptance, but none could grasp the relentless hunger for vengeance that blossomed steadily in my heart, fueling me as entirely as the air I breathed. With Baxter by my side, my faithful companion who never abandoned me, we began preparing for what would become a hunt for the entity that had taken my son. It was a misty night when we finally set out, one that felt pregnant with tension as the fog rolled thickly over the water. Each step we took toward the river felt like a descent into madness, my sanity slowly slipping away with every fleeting moment that passed. I commandeered an old boat that had seen better days, the wormwood creaking under our weight as we embarked on this perilous journey. As the night enveloped us, there was a growing sense of calm that washed over me, unearthing a determination buried deep within the grief. We rode under the watchful, indifferent gaze of stars that seemed to flicker with anticipation, the stillness broken only by the rhythmic splash of our oars in the water. Deep inside, I could feel the lurking malevolence concealed beneath the surface, quiet yet palpable, waiting patiently for its next unsuspecting victim. Baxter stayed close as we ventured further, his instincts razor-sharp, sensing the foreboding presence that hung heavy in the air like a miasma. As we reached the center of the river, the fog thickened around us, wrapping its tendrils around our small vessel like an oppressive shroud. It was during that eerie entrapment that I first saw it, a dark silhouette beneath the water, gliding smoothly and effortlessly, its movements both haunting and utterly mesmerizing. My heart raced with adrenaline as I prepared for the inevitable confrontation. A final reckoning was at hand, where the outcome would alter the course of my life forever. Suddenly, the water erupted into chaos, and the monstrous creature surged to the surface with violent force, revealing its horrendous form, scales that glistened like polished obsidian under the moonlit sky, eyes aflame with primal malevolence. It was a sight that sparked an elemental fear deep within my heart, yet all I could focus on was the overwhelming desire to avenge my son. The beast let out a guttural roar that reverberated through my bones and sent piercing shivers down my spine, and in that moment, I understood that I wasn't merely fighting for revenge for Thomas's untimely death. I was fighting for closure, for the pain that had buried me alive. The boat rocked violently under the tumult of water as the water shroud thrashed wildly around our fragile vessel. Desperation overtook me as I grasped a harpoon, my hands trembling as fear and rage coursed through me like wildfire. With a primal scream that surged from the depths of my being, I lunged at the creature, my fury guiding my aim. Baxter barked with ferocity, leaping at the beast, his loyalty unwavering even in the face of such dread. Together, we fought with a desperation fueled by the profound loss we each carried. The harpoon struck true, piercing the creature's foul flesh. It howled in agony, thrashing violently about us, as if its pain spurred it to fight back with renewed fury. The battle raged on, every blow exchanged echoing my deep-rooted pain and sorrow. Memories of Thomas rushed through my mind, his laughter, his younger dreams of the future, now all lost to the depths of the river. With each strike I landed, I felt a strange mixture of being alive yet utterly hollow, a man clinging to the fraying vestiges of a life that had been brutally ripped away by this abomination of nature. The struggle turned into a chaotic dance, a tumultuous blend of man, dog, and monster engaged in a deadly waltz. Finally, after what felt like an eternity rife with agony and fury, I managed to land a fateful blow. The creature let out one last horrific roar, a haunting sound that resonated with the grief of countless souls it had claimed over the ages, before it sank back into the abyss, a dark shadow extinguished, never to haunt us again. The silence that followed was deafening in its cruelty, wrapping around me like a heavy, oppressive blanket. I had avenged my son, yet the victory tasted bitter and acrid on my tongue, far from the sweet closure I had envisioned. But the triumph came at a significant cost. Amid the chaos of our battle, I had sustained grievous wounds that now throbbed inexorably, sapping the strength from my weary frame. I sank to my knees as the adrenaline that had coursed through me began to dissipate, struggling to pull in each painful breath. Baxter whimpered at my side, nudging my hand with his comforting presence, his brown eyes filled with concern and an understanding that surpassed mere words. I could feel the warmth of my own blood seeping through my clothes, a harrowing reminder of the violent confrontation we'd just survived, while the weight of exhaustion pulled me further into the depths of darkness. As I lay there, staring up at the twinkling starry sky overhead, I realized that my relentless quest for vengeance had come full circle. I could almost feel the echoes of Thomas's laughter carried by the breeze, a soothing balm to my shattered soul that sought solace. The darkness was not merely in the waters that had claimed too many lives, it was rooted deep within me, and I had fought it with every ounce of my being, desperately trying to satiate the anguish gnawing at my spirit. In my final moments, I thought of Baxter, my steadfast companion who had braved the storm alongside me, silently supporting me through all the tumult. I whispered words of love to him, my breath shaky and fading, the words escaping like fragile wisps of smoke carried off by the wind. As my vision blurred, the stars above began to appear like mere pinpricks of light, and in that moment of surrender, I finally felt a profound peace settle within me. The burden I had carried for so long had been lifted from my weary shoulders, and as my breath began to fade into silence, I hoped and prayed that Baxter would find solace in the memories we had forged together in life. When the quiet finally enveloped me and I awoke once more, the boat swayed gently in the whispers of the tide as dawn broke hesitantly over the horizon. But there was no triumphant song to greet me, only the hollow, chilling emptiness where my beloved Baxter should have been. It was a cold affair, a victory that felt unbearably hollow, leaving me bereft and utterly alone. I reached out, expecting to stroke my loyal companion's fur, but found nothing but the empty boat, drifting aimlessly and unfeeling in the morning light. Days crawled by in an agonizing haze until I was finally found by the locals who ventured out to search for us. They spoke in hushed, reverent tones, their gazes filled with pity as they dragged me back to shore, the weight of grief hanging heavily in the air. They discovered Baxter, lying motionless by the boat, unwilling to leave my side even in death. The loyal friend who bravely fought against the darkness with me had mourned not just my son, but also my very soul, and in that heartbreakingly poignant moment, I finally realized that I was not truly alone in my suffering. The echoes of our bond lingered like a bittersweet melody, but the price of my revenge had proven to be far too steep and devastating. As I stood by the river's edge, gazing solemnly into the swirling depths below, I began to understand that both vengeance and loss were inseparably intertwined parts of a greater cycle that bound our existence. The monster may have been vanquished, but the scars it left behind were etched unforgettably deep within my heart. The waters would continue to flow, bearing with them the memories of those lost and the unwavering loyalty of a companion whose bond with me even death could not sever. In the profound silence of that moment, I vowed to honor both Thomas and Baxter, two souls forever intertwined in a tale of love, loss, and unyielding loyalty that had transcended even the fiercest of storms. Though we may never genuinely escape the shadows of our past, through those we love, we find the strength to face another dawn. For in the quiet waters of Juneau, the stories of the lost echo endlessly, a persistent reminder that love, in its infinite forms, transcends even the most violent storms of our lives, leaving behind ripples of hope and connection that linger far beyond the clouds. All right, that's the end of today's story. Thank you for joining me on this thrilling journey through the shadows of life and death. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the little bell to get more spine-chilling tales from Whisper of Horror. Remember, every soul has a story, and here, we give them a voice. See you next time. Stay curious, stay cautious, and keep whispering horror.